Welcome to The Human Experience, a podcast about the stories we live out every day and the importance of championing the vulnerability and courage of the storyteller. I'm your host, Jennifer Peterkin, and it was through my own lived story of walking through domestic violence that this podcast was created. Through traveling the globe and interviewing each guest in person, I am convinced now more than ever that stories have the power to change the world. You can join our community of storytellers by subscribing, leaving a rating and review, signing up for my newsletter, following me on Instagram, and more. Thank you for being here. In a world full of noise, to listen with intention is an act of resistance.
He was 5 pounds, 5 ounces,
Jeez.
Curly hair, nothing physically wrong with him. It looked like he was sleeping. And they cleaned him up and they swaddled him in a blanket and I held him for 2 hours. And like I said, he looked perfect. I mean, nothing wrong with him. And it was about midnight and the nurse came in and said, we need to take your baby. And I knew that was the last time I would see him here on earth. And, that was the day my life changed. It would never, ever be the same.
Episode 39 of The Human Experience is Heather's story. As a young newlywed, Heather was ready to step into the next phase of her life, motherhood. She and her husband were excited to welcome their first baby, but tragically, she would never be able to meet her son, as they lost him when Heather was 38 weeks pregnant. And though she was able to give birth to a healthy baby boy only a short while later, the trauma and grief of losing her first son would stay with her. It's been nearly 20 years, and Heather has just recently started sharing the full scope of her story. The past couple of decades have been filled with a lot of pain, but in that time, she has also found incredible healing. This episode was recorded in St. Louis, Missouri. A brief content warning before we begin: this episode contains conversations around infant loss and suicide. Please proceed with care. Where would you start your story?
So I start 1980.
Love it.
with Wheel of Fortune and Pat Sajak.
Oh my God. Okay, let's go.
All right, you want me to start?
Yes, I do. Let's go. Pat Sajak, what's more intriguing than that?
All right, so I come from a trauma-free childhood, happy family, ate dinner every night together, watched Wheel of Fortune, MacGyver, if you remember MacGyver. And I feel like I didn't have a lot of struggles growing up. I got an argument with my BFF, but that was about the gist of any struggles or hard times. And I married my high school sweetheart. And I got on my little red Toyota and drove across state to get married and live with him. And I left my family behind. And that was very hard on my family.
Yeah.
And so we got married. And about 2 years into the marriage, we're like, okay, we're financially stable. We both have good jobs. Life is good. Let's have a baby. And I got pregnant within the first month.
Wow.
I know. I guess, when you're 22, 23, now I have a 7-year-old now. That took about a year. So,
okay.
So yeah, within the first month we got pregnant. I think my husband was like, oh my gosh, I was hoping we could try more. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
So it was a healthy pregnancy. I had gestational diabetes, which is odd. Diabetes did not run in my family at the time, but you can get accustomed to that. It's just changing your diet. You eat a little cleaner, lay off the Girl Scout cookies. And so I had my baby shower. It was about 37 weeks along. I had already had the nursery decorated by the time I was 6 months pregnant. I had the name picked out. So for me to wait that close to the due date, I pretty much had everything taken care of. I'm like, and so my coworkers had put together a baby shower, and it was one of the most happiest days of my life, and nothing could go wrong. And you have the baby shower games and let's measure your belly and what was it? Whoever sat down and crossed their legs, like, I don't know, got their ribbon taken away. I don't know. But I remember that day very, very vividly, though. It was a Sesame Street themed cake and just, I don't remember what I did a month ago, but I sure can tell you something that happened, 18 years ago. And we went into the doctor appointment 2 days later. It was on a Monday. I was 38 weeks along, 2 weeks before my due date. Go in for, routine checkup, and they could not locate the heartbeat. And at first, they're kind of, maybe the baby has moved. Let's try this way. Let's try that way. And it got very quiet in the room. And at that point, my husband actually had not shown up yet. He was on his way from work. So I was kind of there by myself. And this is the first time I've been pregnant. I don't know. Is this normal? Is this, maybe the baby's flipped over. Like, I don't know. And then my husband walked in right when it started getting serious. And there was a very serious tone to the room. And the nurse walked out and said, "I'll be right back." And my husband said, "What's going on?" And I said, "They can't find the heartbeat." And the nurse came back and said, "The doctor would like to see you. He wants to take an ultrasound just to see what's going on." And at this point, nothing, like I said, this is the first time I've been pregnant. I don't know, looking back, I probably would have been more upset than I was, but I think you're just going through the motions. And I go in, he does an ultrasound, and where the black circle is where you usually see the flicker of a heartbeat, there was no more flicker. And the doctor looked at me and he said, I'm so sorry, but your baby has passed. And I think, I was in shock. I always think of now the 5 stages of grief, and it's like denial, shock, you're numb, going through the motions. That's exactly what I was going through. I think I shed a tear, but it was maybe just 1 or 2 because, you're just, how does this happen 2 weeks before the due date?
Yeah.
Like 2 days after a baby shower? It's almost like it wasn't even real.
Yeah. You think you're in the clear at that point, right? It's like, okay, what is it? You make it past 32 weeks and then it's like, okay, it's pretty smooth sailing from here because even if I go into labor, I should be okay. You don't think about that happening.
Mm-hmm. And, I was only, 23. I didn't even know this was a thing. Mm-hmm. Like I've heard of miscarriages.
Sure.
But I didn't know what a stillbirth was. And so the doctor, took me into his office and he said, we're going to obviously run some tests, see what happened. And he said, you will need to be induced and deliver your baby. And again, I'm just going through the motions. It hasn't hit yet. Thinking about it now, it's like, I'm going to deliver a deceased baby. Like to even process that, so I'm just speechless, in shock, thinking, oh, do I have my hospital bag? Like, all these random thoughts. And I'm like, it's like when you go into labor 2 weeks before your due date and you're like, I'm not ready. Like I wasn't, all of a sudden you're freaking out. Like not only was I not ready, I was not ready to deliver a baby in this, condition. And so he said, when would you like to do this? And I'm like, well, I don't want to go to bed knowing I have this baby inside of me.
Yeah.
And I understood what he was saying. Do you need to go home? Do you need to get things? Do we need to schedule something for the next? Like, I understand what he was saying. But in my mind, I'm like, I'm not leaving this hospital. I don't even want to be in the parking lot knowing that my baby's not alive anymore inside of me. And so they they took me a back way to a hospital room. I didn't know there were back ways.
Oh,
you don't
yeah.
think about that stuff. Like you kind of learn as you go. I'm like, well, that would make sense. Like the doctors need those back ways. But he's like, we're going to take you a back way just so you don't have to go through the waiting room for 2 reasons. They didn't tell me, but looking back, it's like, okay, I didn't want to see other pregnant women with their pregnancy glow. And they probably didn't want to see me like in my condition. So they took me the back way, go down this elevator. They've already got me a room waiting for me. And, it's okay. Go ahead and get your hospital gown on and we'll be in soon to induce you. And I think a nurse or somebody said, do you need to call some family or friends? I'm like, oh, yeah. And I remembered my parents being out of town. Like, my parents never go out of town. Like, who goes out of town? And back then, we're talking 2004. Cell phones were not as common as they are now. But honestly, my parents still don't have a cell phone. So I still couldn't get a hold of me. Yeah. So I couldn't get a hold of them. I didn't know where they were. I know they were out of state. And all I could think of was, okay, well, maybe I can call my grandma because my grandma lives near my parents and maybe she'll know when they're getting back. So I had to call my grandma and it didn't quite hit me. What am I going to say to my grandma besides, where's my parents?
Yeah.
I was going to have to tell her what happened. And I don't know about your grandma, but mine was super sweet and sweet voice. And she answered the phone and she said, "Hi, Heather, how are you?" And I froze. And I'm not one to be speechless, but I think that was the first time ever where my mouth opened and nothing came out. I could not. And that's when I did start crying a little bit. Because then it makes it real, right? Then it's reality. You start telling people.
Yeah.
And I had handed the phone to my husband and I said, I can't tell my grandma. How do you do that? How do you say, okay, grandma, my baby died? So I don't know what he said, but I was getting my hospital gown on. I was like, I can't, I'm in my own little world, getting into bed, waiting for them to induce me. And the next thing I know, there's about 20 people in my hospital room, coworkers, father-in-law, mother-in-law, brother-in-law, brother-in-law's wife, because my husband came from a big family. They were all local. Of course, my parents had not arrived yet. I heard that they were on their way. And all these people were standing in my room, not knowing I was starting to have labor pains. So here I am in a very vulnerable state, about to deliver a baby that has passed away. And they were just all staring at me. And it was the most uncomfortable, vulnerable feeling I have ever had. And they just stared at me with their sad eyes, like crying, like staring at me. And I remember closing my eyes saying, "Please make them go away. Please make them go away. Please make them go away." Because I wasn't strong enough to be like, get out of my room. I wasn't strong enough because I knew they were there to support me. It was like this whole catch-22. It's like, I know you're here to support me, comfort me. Nobody knew what to say. So they just all stood there crying. I'm over here like in labor pains with my toes curling up, not to show them that I was in pain.
I mean, not strong enough, you say, but how much is one person supposed to carry at one time? There was so much already going on inside of your head. Having to manage the emotions of other people in that moment is just way too much. Way too much.
And I am one of those that I do like to comfort other people. Whether I'm the one who's hurt or whatever. So in my mind, I did want to be like, oh, it'll be okay. And I want to console them. I'm like, no, wait, I'm in labor. You guys need to go.
Yeah.
And it felt like hours that they were staring at me. I know it was not that long. And again, I appreciate them being there. I get it. But in the other sense, I wanted them all to disappear. And soon enough, a while later, my parents did walk in, and my mom was just bawling and crying. And it started, me crying, because it is real. Like when mom finally walks in and you see mom upset, it's happening. It's real. It's not this dream. And I think it was mom that said, everybody out. And I even think I might have whispered it to her, and I was like, I want them to leave. And so that was the last I saw of them. They might have gone to the waiting room. They might have gone home. They were gone. And it was just me, my husband, my mom. I assume my dad was there. It's all a blur at that point. All I know is my mom was crying, and she stayed with me the whole time. And my husband was there, and I did deliver my baby. His name is Nicholas. And it took me years to even say his name, because it's such a very sacred name. So I delivered Nicholas. He was 5 pounds, 5 ounces, Jeez. Curly hair, looked perfect. Nothing physically wrong with him. It looked like he was sleeping. When I delivered him, you could hear a pin drop in the room. You're used to hearing the baby cry or make a noise when the doctors talk. I mean, nobody said a word as that baby came out. I pushed twice and he came out. And what they did not warn me was they were going to lay him on my chest after I delivered him. When you deliver a baby, they usually lay the baby on your chest. They clean you up. I was not prepared to have my dead baby on my chest.
Oh my.
And I literally put my hands up. I did not know what to do. Do I touch him? Like what? I don't know what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
And I think it was a natural thing for them to do, to start cleaning me up, cleaning the baby up. And, you just got to put the baby somewhere. So I guess I just put him on my chest. But it was just a moment of, what do I do?
Yeah.
And I think they could see that on my face, and they quickly took him off, and they cleaned him up, and they swaddled him in a blanket, and I held him for 2 hours. And like I said, he looked perfect. I mean,
oh my God.
Nothing wrong with him. And I held him, and it was about midnight, and the nurse came in and said, we need to take your baby. And I knew that was the last time I would see him here on earth. And I also feel like that was the longest day I've ever lived, because even that morning I was at work. I worked a corporate job. I was in a cubicle wearing my business attire, and here I am at midnight holding my baby in a blanket. So they took my baby away, and, I didn't see him again. And, that was the day my life changed. It would never, ever be the same. And 2 days later, my breast milk comes in. I have no baby to give it to. And I remember being in the cradle, or what do they call it, fetal position on the floor, just crying. There was sadness. There was still denial. There was, why did this happen? You're still just going through the motions. And around that same day, I was at a funeral home planning a funeral for my baby. And I was picking out a headstone and a baby casket. And I did not know they made blue caskets for boys, pink caskets for baby girls. And these caskets are tiny. I mean, what, 2-3 feet or something like that? Yeah. I didn't, again, I'm 22, 23. I'm like, I didn't even know this was a thing. I didn't know there was baby land in a cemetery where all the babies are buried. Like that's a thing in cemeteries. And so all the money that we had saved up for our baby, for a babysitter and baby expenses, were now being used all for, a $2,000 baby funeral. And, we did graveside. So my baby was in, the casket. And I do remember there were 60, I think I counted them, 60 coworkers that actually came and attended. And, I worked for a home builder at the time, and So we had the land developers, and I had 60-year-old men who I'd worked with coming too. So it was so many different ages and different people, men, women, young, old, came and, sacrificed their time, to come and be there for me and my baby. And I remember, once again, the sad eyes all staring at me. And so I was on maternity leave. So I delivered my baby. I have a 6-week maternity leave, paid maternity leave. My body's still healing. So during that time, the doctor did call and said, we did find out what happened. And I said, okay. He said there was nothing, in your blood work, nothing genetic. He said it was simply a knot in the umbilical cord. He said it was just like a shoelace knot. He said there's true knots and there's false knots. He said the true knot is literally like a shoelace knot. The false knot is a kink. And he said, it wasn't wrapped around his neck. It just simply had gotten tangled and knotted itself. And he said, do you remember the last time you had felt him move? And I said, it was the night of my baby shower. He had the hiccups. And then I went in Monday for my appointment. So sometime between baby shower and my appointment. And because of all the stuff that had happened, I now had insomnia. So, every time I closed my eyes, it was a repeat of either the day at the hospital, the baby shower, the funeral, people staring at me. I could not close my eyes. So I would just stare every night at the cracks in the ceiling at our apartment, and I would not sleep. And a lot of times when you have insomnia, it plays with your mind too. And so then my insomnia was accompanied by fear. So I still wanted a baby. Our baby nursery was still waiting for a baby. It was decorated. It had a crib. It was literally like ready to go. And I told my husband, I said, I still want a baby. Because I had this emptiness, this void that I wanted to fill.
Sure.
So I got pregnant a month into trying, I got pregnant again. And that's when the fear really kicked in. I did not sleep for 8 months straight. I was afraid if I didn't feel him move, what happens if he gets a knot in the cord? What happened? I mean, all sorts of scenarios go through my head, and I was living in fear and insomnia. Plus, I went back to work after leave, right? After maternity leave, I was working my 8 to 5 corporate job. Mm-hmm. I had bills to pay. I was a wife. I had errands to run, laundry to do, dishes, dinner, while living with insomnia and fear 24/7. My baby was born healthy. His name is Rylan. He is now 17 years old. He wants to go into the Air Force. But to this day, I'm very protective of him. I've learned to not hover over him and be the helicopter mom like I was when he was 2. I have grown from that. But anytime he hurts himself, I freak out to this day. Like, I remember when he was a toddler and he was 2 years old and he pinched his finger in the sliding glass door. It didn't break the skin. He cried. I couldn't be in the same room as him. My husband was there. He took care of him. He's like, it's okay. It didn't break. It's fine. I'm like, I couldn't. I'm like, oh my gosh, this baby's going to die. And he's now 17. He cut his finger at work 2 weeks ago. My heart started racing. I played it off like I was cool because now I'm the cool mom. Right? I mean, I'm 42 now. I'm the cool mom. But I wasn't able to get to him. He walked across from work to urgent care, and I wasn't able to be with him at that particular moment. And all I could think of was, I got to be there for him. I got to be there for him. Oh, that's my baby. He's hurt. Yeah, he's 17 years old. He graduated high school, going to the airport. But it was my trigger. and he ended up getting 7 stitches on his finger.
Oh, wow. He really cut his finger.
He did. And I remember my heart just beating really fast, and it's still hard to this day.
Yeah.
Like, if he's struggling mentally, I want to fix it and make him happy. I've grown in that.
Yeah. I mean, even the fact that you can talk about it and see it from a different perspective and say that I've grown or I am still trying to grow is, that's self-awareness. So that's always a good thing. But I think anybody that has experienced any sort of trauma can identify with or empathize with this idea that when you get triggered because of PTSD or CPTSD, you don't have control of your body and how your body reacts to it.
Right.
And so, you hear these things and doesn't matter how long it's been, you are immediately taken back to how you felt when you were losing your baby. And it doesn't matter that intellectually that everything's going to be okay. That doesn't matter in that moment. And your body is just reacting to this. And I'm not any sort of mental health professional, but having had to learn, because I didn't know what was going on when I was processing my own trauma, I was like, okay, this is why. It's almost like an out-of-body experience. So it's like your body is having this reaction, and mentally I'm like, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? I don't know. At first it was like, why is my body doing this? I don't have any control over myself right now. So it's scary, and trauma is a very lasting thing. So all that to say, it's awesome that you're growing and moving forward, but trauma is trauma. It's, it happened. It's always going to be there to some extent.
So you should have seen me at my very first baby shower that I attended for a friend after I delivered Nicholas. I was just like that. My body, I was shaking. I couldn't do it. Baby showers were a trigger for me. Even to go to the store and see a card that says, "Congratulations on your baby," I can't buy you that card. Sorry. I can't.
Yep.
I'll do it after the baby's born. And this went on for years. And there came a point where I almost had to force myself to go to a baby shower just to heal or grow. Like, we have to do hard things so we're not stuck.
Yeah.
And I do remember maybe it took my 5th baby shower to attend in a matter of 15 years. I still don't go to them very often. Maybe the 5th one where I could actually go. My heart wasn't racing. I wasn't shaking. And I was smiling. But it took a very long time. And yeah, it's like your body responds. So when Rylan, my rainbow baby, was about a year old, that's when my depression hit. And I didn't even know there was a thing called delayed depression, delayed grief, delayed response.
Okay.
And, because you have the 5 stages of grief.
Right.
But nobody says, it could take 10 years to get through all stages. It's not like you just check it off the list and you're cured in a month,
Sure. So
I had been still living in fear that something would happen to Rylan. Still insomnia, because once you get it, it's really hard, without any kind of medication to get back to your regular 8 hours of sleep a night. It's like your body is all messed up. So when he turned 1 year old, we had his birthday party. And I remember him sitting there with his birthday hat. And it just hit me that Nicholas, who was now in heaven, wouldn't have a birthday cake ever, or a birthday party, or he would never, go to kindergarten and carry a little backpack and sit in a little desk, or, he would never play hide and seek or tag outside with friends, or have his first girlfriend and his first kiss and his marriage and a wife and kids. And all this stuff just flooded through my head. And that's when the depression hit really hard. I still didn't cry much because I felt like I cried enough. And so my depression was more just no energy, no sleep, just sadness. And I also became very angry with God. Growing up, we went to church periodically. My parents were entrepreneurs, so if there was a church near their shop that they would lease, they'd send us, me and my brother, across the street and be like, go to Sunday school. And they would change buildings every year or so when their lease was up. So one year I was a Methodist and one year I was a Baptist, and it was whatever church was nearby the store.
There you go. Hey,
and
that works.
You know, we would walk over there, but you know, I didn't have a close and personal relationship with God. I knew of Him. You know, you went to Sunday school, so I didn't know Him personally, but I knew Him enough that I was angry with Him. I said, "You created us. Why did you do this?" You know, we always say, why? Why is this happening? And I got very, very angry with God because I felt like He teased me. I felt like He dangled something in front of me, only to take it away 14 days before I was to deliver my baby. I was angry with Him because I was like, God, do you like to see me paranoid? Do you like to see me with insomnia? You must think this is funny. It's not funny. And I was so mad at Him. And you like me to not sleep for 8 months? You like me to be depressed because this is not the God I thought you were. You know, this is not the God that I learned about in Sunday school. Became very angry. And I think too, whenever we go through trauma, grief, we do want to point fingers and point blame. And I couldn't blame the doctors, couldn't blame myself. So, you know, it's one thing if we blame another person here on earth. They can argue with us. There can be reconciliation. But with God, you know, I could easily turn my back on Him and not talk to Him if I wanted to. Yeah. What's He going to do about it? Like, He's already taken my baby from me. I'm already fearful, depressed, insomnia, paranoia. I forgot to mention with the paranoia, when I went back to work after I delivered my baby, I do remember with the paranoia, I felt like everybody knew my story. I mean, all my coworkers did, and those were 60, actually more than 60, but so if they did, who's to say they told other people? Now I feel like the whole world knows my story. So when I'm driving on the highway, everybody in their car was staring at me, or at least that's how I felt. I would go to the grocery store and I could have sworn people were staring at my back, like from behind. Oh, there goes that girl whose baby died. And I labeled myself that. And you know, 2003, 2004, you didn't talk about this stuff. There wasn't support groups. There wasn't a counselor on every corner and a psychiatrist on every block. And so I literally felt like I was the only person this has ever happened to. And I remember getting out of my car, going to the office building, and there were, you know, it was an office building that had the tinted windows you couldn't see in kind of thing. And I could have sworn everybody was lined up on those windows watching me get out of my car, watching me walk down the sidewalk, watching me open that door. Oh, there she goes, that poor girl. And it was like that for about a year. I had paranoia like that everywhere I went. I got my oil changed at Valvoline. They knew my story. That's how I felt. Those guys.
Yeah.
That, you know. And because I was depressed, insomnia, paranoia, fear that something would happen to my current baby, I did start getting suicidal ideation. And I was not happy. I was not joyful. Who wants this life? I don't want this life. And I remember a reoccurring thought to this day. I know what it was and of how to take my life. And it played in my mind every day for about a year. And I drove about 45 minutes to work every morning, and it was always in the car on the way to work because you're by yourself in the car. You have no besides, it's not like people are talking to you, and you're just in your own thoughts. And every day for about a year, it played over and over and over of what I would do. And I didn't have hope. I wasn't happy. I hadn't smiled in months. I hadn't laughed. And I decided, okay, I need to go see a psychiatrist or something. Like, how do I find a psychiatrist? I know nothing about this stuff.
Yeah.
And I guess I got on, I don't think it was AOL dial-up anymore. I think we were beyond that, but
not much passed.
How do you even find a site? Nowadays there's resources and you just go on, but I didn't want to just go to some random place. So even though I was mad at God, not talking to him, I do not flip people off, but I was giving him the bird. I don't recommend doing that, but I was giving God the middle finger. I was rolling my eyes. I wanted nothing to do with him and his teachings. But ironically, I wanted to find a Christian counselor. Now that doesn't... I don't know. But it was I'm like, looking back, I'm like, that's pretty funny actually.
Yeah, right?
But at the time, I'm like, I hate you, God. Well, I never hated him, but I'm like, I'm so mad at you, God, but I'm going to find me a good Christian counselor. So I did. And that was the first person I was able to tell my story to.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing, mom kind of knows what's going on, husband kind of knows, but for me to let it all out and open my heart to somebody at now 24, 25 years old, this is what I've been carrying now for about a year and a half. And she was very compassionate. And, you do your evaluation. How's your sleep? How's your appetite? I was underweight at the time. I'm pretty thin now, but I was 5'9". I was around 114, which is about 20 pounds underweight. But I did eat. But I think it's just because I was carrying trauma. Mm-hmm. I couldn't gain weight. It was, I like to eat. It's not that, I didn't have friends and family member, oh, you're not eating. I ate. I just think, I just went through this traumatic event and it was just messing me up somehow to where I ate whatever I wanted, ate fast food and sodas, and I was losing weight. And so she said, I do feel like you need to see a psychiatrist. They can give you medicine. I can't give you medicine. You'll need to actually see a doctor. Mm-hmm. But I do feel like you need to be on some antidepressants, maybe some anxiety medicine, sleep medicine. You haven't slept in like 2 years.
Yeah.
And so I went into the psychiatrist's office and I immediately did not feel, what do they call it? Bedside manners.
Yeah.
I did not feel good. Like it just was, but I didn't know what I didn't know, you don't know what to expect.
Sure.
So I walked in, it's a dark office. He had one lamp lit in the corner. We sit down. He has this black, thick hair to his shoulder. He's like slicking it back with his hand. I'm like, oh my God. It was not, but I needed the medicine. Mm-hmm. So I sat down and the counselor had told me, she said, just tell him your story. And so I sat down. I said, do you want to know my story? And he looked at me and he said, I know your story. Your baby died. Your eyes are set back. Are you anorexic?
Oh my.
And this is 18 years ago. I still remember those words to this day. The exact words he said. What do you say? Like, I'm 25, never been to a psychiatrist, never talked to a counselor, never been in this situation. No. And he's like, well, I'm going to weigh you every week because I want to monitor your weight. Okay. Well, looking back as an adult that I am now, I went to go slap that guy. But, he should have said, I realize all your symptoms. Insomnia, paranoia, depression, anger. You went through a very traumatic event. You're grieving. Of course you're going to be underweight. That or you would be overweight because some people eat food to make themselves feel better. Like, where was that in that conversation? It was, I think you're anorexic. I'm going to weigh you every week. I'm going to put you on this medication for depression. I'm going to give you some medicine for, I don't know what all it was, but, sleep. And he said, okay, we'll follow up and I want to see you next week. Goodbye.
Wow. And that's your first experience at a psychiatrist.
That's my first and last.
Well, I don't blame you.
So anyway, point is, I got medicine though. And I started sleeping better. And I was still, medicine does not take away grief. It does not take away anger. It does help with insomnia. It helps with anxiety. It helps with your mood. But it did not take the pain away. It did not take my problem away.
Yeah.
And so I was still struggling very much to where it started getting into my marriage, affecting my marriage. By then, my son Rylan was 4. I wasn't happy in my marriage, and I filed for divorce. There was, many, many factors why our marriage was not working, but I know this obviously played a factor into it. And I filed for divorce, and 6 months later, we were divorced. And then I find myself in an apartment being a single mom where, my now ex-husband, saw Rylan every other weekend. And I was now single mom trying to navigate life, still depressed, still like, oh, I got to pay the bills myself now. I got to get him to a daycare and school, like, nobody to depend on. And so I was a single mom for about 2 years. And let me tell you, those are strong women. And anytime I talk to single mom, I'm like, I have been there. I know what you go through. It's tough. It is tough. You have nobody. When you have a bad day, you can't just say, Dad, can you take care of the kids? Order a pizza. I'm going to go to my room and relax. Like, there's none of that. Yeah, this went on for a while, single mom. And that's when I hit rock bottom. There's always a rock bottom, right?
Yep.
You can only be strong for so long. Now my grief with my baby was turning into divorce grief. Even if you divorce somebody and it is, you leave and you're amicable, you're respectful to each other, you agreed on the terms, there's still a loss.
Absolutely.
There's a loss of identity. There's a loss, so much. And so I was sad. I was confused and sad, and I wanted to blame my husband for everything and blame God for everything. And it was very blurry as to, am I still grieving about my baby now, or am I grieving about a loss of a marriage? Because we'd been together for 12 years. I met him when I was 17, divorced close to when I was 30. And I literally hit rock bottom where the tears came at work, at my cubicle, and they wouldn't stop.
Oh my.
And I went to the bathroom and they wouldn't stop. And I sent myself home. I'm driving on the highway. The tears would not stop. Run my errands, pick up my kid. The tears don't stop. 4-year-old little Rylan's like, what's for dinner, Mom? I'm hungry. I don't know. I'm like, why are you crying, Mom?
Yeah.
I don't know. My life is falling. You literally feel like your life is falling apart. Like,
Sure.
is this, I still had not smiled, or, I'm sure I had smiled with my 4-year-old,
Yeah.
but to truly be happy, like I had not felt like that
Yeah.
since before that baby shower.
Wow.
And I just cried and cried and cried. And I had a friend who was a coworker, and she's like, have you ever heard of support groups? I'm like, the one where you sit in a circle and you introduce yourself and you tell strangers about your problems? No. She's like, well, now this was, now it's about 2010. Support groups still weren't a huge, now there's many, many, many resources and many, grief share, healing is a choice, divorce care. And, back then it was not, I think there was AA was pretty well known, but, for me to go to, what?
Right.
I don't, what are you talking about? And she's like, well, Heather, you won't stop crying. And medicine can only do so much.
Right.
And I was on 6 different prescription medications in my 20s. And I was also, I had chronic pain now because we do carry grief physically.
Yes.
I had chronic low back pain 24/7. I had tension in my shoulders 24/7. So they had me on muscle spasm medications because then my muscles were spasming. Looking back, I was a hot mess. Like I was a hot mess. If that's the definition, like, and I do remember like laying in bed at night being like, oh my gosh, I'm in my late 20s on 6 different prescription medications. I can't stop crying. I'm trying to raise a son, trying to go to work 8 to 5. Like now depending on child support to pay some of my bills, like for my son, like, so I was like, okay, tell me about this group.
Yeah.
You know? And she's like, well, it's divorce care and it's nationwide and just, just Google it and find a church near you. Like a lot of churches offer it and they keep it small and just, just talk to them and see, if they can help. And I must have been at such a place of rock bottom that I said yes.
Yeah.
It's very humbling to admit I can't do this on my own, especially with me still being angry with God.
I was going to say, walking into a church.
Oh, yeah. Still angry with God. So this is now, let's see, my son's 5. I had Nicholas, that would be 6 years before. So I was angry with God for about 5-6 years. Angry, like livid, like I want nothing to do with you. You did this to me. This is your fault. And so I went to divorce care and it's a Christian-based group, at a church. I'm like, why? But I went, and sure enough, we sit in a circle. I'm like, oh my gosh. And, I laughed through this, but it was another moment where I had to be very vulnerable. And I had to tell them about my baby because that was a lot of where my emotions were rooted from, even though it was a divorce support group. It's like I had to start from the beginning and be like, this is not the result of my divorce, but this played a factor into why my marriage fell apart. And again, 15 people staring at me with sad eyes as I talk about my baby and their tears coming down and a trigger. So here I am, my heart's racing, I'm shaking because it takes me back to the hospital room as I'm in labor with people staring at me with their sad eyes. Here I am again with sad eyes. But I stuck it out because you quickly learn that people don't have your exact story, but it doesn't mean they don't experience the emotions you're experiencing. And so I got to hear everyone else's story. And yeah, they were experiencing insomnia, anger with God, some suicidal ideation. And I was like, wow, I thought I was the only one.
Yeah. Is this the first time you didn't feel alone?
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's such a heavy burden to carry for so long.
Yeah. And I still felt like I was the only one that had ever delivered a stillborn baby. But
yeah, I
did feel like, okay, they kind of know what I feel like.
Yeah.
And so I went, this was a 16 week class. We went every Wednesday night. And it was about the 8th week, so about 2 months into it, that I woke up and I wasn't quite as angry with God as I was. And each week, it is faith-based. They cover topics, 1 week's about anger, 1 week's about loneliness, 1 week's about, money problems or, budgeting, but it's all faith-based. And I just remember not feeling as angry. And one of the men in the group, he was actually close to my age. He said, you want me to pray with you? Because we were both single, around the same age. Because I told him he was a strong Christian, and I told him about my relationship with God. Like I had not prayed since I was 21, maybe. I mean, almost 10 years, something like that. Because I really wasn't close to God before that baby shower. And so he would just pray for me, and he'd be like, God, just build a hedge around Heather and protect her heart and help her through this, process. And it's tough. And, we know, when we follow you, there's a way out and we can find hope again. And Part of me did not believe what he was saying. I'm like, okay, I mean, if you want to pray, that's fine. But part of me did, though.
Yeah.
So you're torn. It's a struggle.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, yes, God, I do want you to help me through this, but God, I'm still really mad at you. And somebody told me once, they were like, well, you realize you were still in a relationship with God, even though you were mad at him. And I was like, was I? Because I was really mad at him. And they're like, well, yeah, because you didn't deny his existence. You still thought about him every day. You were just mad at him. It's no different than me being mad at my friend, being in an argument. Like, you're still in a relationship with them.
Yeah.
Just because you're mad at them.
It's like that the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference.
Right. Because I started feeling guilty as my heart would soften through this class. I was like, I started, shifting my mind a little bit, shifting the way I was thinking, maybe God was taking care of my baby in heaven, and maybe God took Nicholas from me to prevent something bad from happening to him here on earth. Or, maybe this happened as a way for God to bring me closer to him. Like, I don't like the way he did it, but maybe, and you think of all these different scenarios, and 3 times in the Bible it says that Jesus wept. And so then I started thinking, well, maybe he was sad for me. Maybe he cried when my baby didn't have a heartbeat, and maybe he cried at the funeral, and maybe he cried in the hospital room, and maybe he was there for me when I had suicidal ideation. And so I went through the whole divorce care class, finished it, and we were smiling at the end of the class. Every single one of us was smiling, and we were in a really good mood, and we were happy, and we hugged each other. We had like a little potluck dinner, to say farewell to everybody, and we did find healing.
Yeah.
It didn't solve our problems by any means, but there was a sense of healing, and I did find myself smiling, and I was like, whoa, what was that? Did I, huh?
Kind of crept up on you.
Like, go in the mirror, do a double take. What was that on my face? And so I went back, single mom life, and I woke up one morning and I was like, I think I need to find a church. But first I had to fix my issue, or not fix, I'm a fixer, but face my anger with God, or to at least ask him to forgive me of my anger. And he's very gracious. Like, he gives grace. We don't give ourselves grace. So I begged God for about 2 months to forgive me. He forgave me the first time I prayed and said, God, please forgive me for being angry with you, for rolling my eyes at you, like blaming you and being so angry with you. You know what I went through. I was hurting. He forgave me that one prayer, but not me. I had to do it too. I had to do it 8 more weeks. I mean, and every day I was like, I'm so sorry, God. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. Please forgive me. Please forgive me. Please forgive me. And a month later, I find a church home. I jump into a Bible study. 8 weeks later, I'm baptized for the first time in my life. And I do feel like my joy does come from God, and my character and the healing. And 9 months after I get baptized, what happens? I meet a guy at church. And so begins stepmom life.
Okay.
And 4 children.
Wow. Yeah. From 1 to 3 immediately, right?
I went from one to, how many kids do I have?
Yeah.
So when I met my now husband, we've been married for over 10 years, and we still go to the same church. And so Rylan was how old was Rylan? He was 5. He was going into 5, 6, going into kindergarten. There was, he had a daughter who was 6. Let's see. So Rylan was 5, she was 6, the other one was 8. So fast forward 3, 4 years, I quit my job. I become a stay-at-home mom to all these 3 preteens. I'm like, Lord, holy moly, what have I done?
Yeah.
But I still, as hard as it was to be a stepmom, it was still better than what I had ever gone through for the 10 years. You know, I'm like, as hard it is to be in a marriage with, you know, step girls that don't always want to come to your house and don't want to eat your food. And, you know, so now they're in college and we have a 7-year-old. So Ryland's 17, the girls are 19, almost 20, and we have a 7-year-old. And, you know, my story, my baby shower was 18 years ago. And just in the last year and a half have I even been able to tell the story without crying, getting choked up. But I do feel like the more I share my story, the more I'm healed. And the fact that we laughed during this shows me that I have healed from it. And I do find joy. And growing up as a teenager, we also owned a resort and we cleaned cabins as teenagers. Like my parents had us clean cabins. And so I was in charge of beds and vacuuming, and there were 14 cabins and we were their little slaves. But, but you know what? We got paid. But my point is, I now clean houses full circle, but I actually enjoy it because I'm serving others. And I like being outwards focused, and I like to be able to go to someone's house and clean their house. You know, one of them, he's a veteran. His wife passed away. He hasn't cleaned his house. And for me and our team to go in and clean his, it's a blessing for them, and it makes me feel good. Yeah. And if that's where my life is at, that I'm a stay-at-home mom, but as the kids got older, I kind of got bored at the house. I'm like, I can only do so much laundry and dishes, and I'm a person that keeps myself busy. So I took it upon myself. I'm like, you know what? I'll just clean some houses while the kids are at school. Like, gives me something to do. I'm home by lunch. But I really do enjoy it. And I think that's what we have to do when we're struggling and going through hard times, is we have to get out of our own head.
Yes.
We have to take that focus off of ourselves, because I was mentally in my head with that paranoia and all that stuff for so long. And, you know, there's times I do things, I don't want to always do it. Like, I don't want to serve you because, you know, it's like you're just grumpy that day. It's like, I just want to stay home and watch TV. But when you do it, it makes you feel so much better. Yeah. And, you know, even when I'm making dinner for my family, like, you're serving your family, like, you know, and I don't know, it just, I do have joy, and I like my life. I really, truly like my life right now. And I never thought I would ever say that. Yeah. You know, in my early 30s, I was that stepmom pulling my hair out. Like, what did I just sign up for? But I do feel, you know, now that I'm 42, I can breathe now. You know, I can find joy in the little things. And, you know, I just encourage anybody going through, you know, grief and trauma to reach out to somebody, because I did it by myself until I went to that scary psychiatrist's office and that crazy support group. Which didn't make it better, yeah. Right. But I just know I did try to navigate it so much by myself. Yeah. And it was so hard. So I just encourage anybody, you know, going through that, talk to at least a friend. You know, I was also prideful during that time. Like, anger and pride go together. So whenever you carry anger with you, it also makes you prideful. Like, I didn't want to sit down and be vulnerable and talk to a friend about my struggles, but it probably would have made me feel better. I mean, no, they wouldn't have fixed me or solved my problems, but I just want to share my story so people can see that, you know, I did find joy, you know, and I was able to I wasn't able to, God was able to turn my grief and my sorrow into joy. And, you know, I do give God all the credit. So we've made up. We're friends again.
Your story it's beautiful in what you've found now. You know, not everything that you've walked through is obviously beautiful, but your trauma is such an isolating thing, and it does feel like you're the only one going through it. Again, even if you intellectually know that that's not true, because you can pretty much guarantee that you're not the first person to go through something, right? But it doesn't matter that you know that in your mind when that's how you feel, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
and what's interesting is the church I've been to now for 10 years, we always say our church is full of a bunch of messed up people because we're all kind of messed up. But I've met other people, even at my church, that have had stillborn babies,
Wow.
not as close to my due date, but even, 4 or 5 months along. And there's been women in my church with miscarriages, and there's been a lot of pregnancy loss. And so it just goes to show I wasn't alone. I just didn't have a community. I didn't have that support. So it does make me feel, I guess, better to know that, women do deal with, I've had an ectopic pregnancy before, before I was pregnant with my youngest, and it is more common than we realize. We just don't want to talk about it.
right.
But
it's great, like you said, to talk about it, to share your story. It does help. It helps you. It helps other people. Yeah. And I agree with everything you've said. It's important that we take the time to process our grief, our trauma, and strike a balance between doing that and then not becoming so inward focused that we forget to see the goodness in the world around us, right? Because there is goodness, there is joy and happiness and abundance. But when we're stuck in our trauma brain and survival brain and all of that, it can be really difficult to see that. So walking that balance can be really difficult, and it's not a linear path, right? Like healing is hard, and you are like one step forward, 2 steps back sometimes, but it's important that you keep moving forward.
And for the ladies who don't think it's okay to cry, it's okay to cry.
Oh yeah.
And for years, I did not shed a tear. Like, I was so angry. Still to this day, I'm not a vulnerable, emotional crier at all. But I do remember for the longest time, I would not shed a tear, like with anything. And just recently, I've started watching some, I ain't going to say it. It's a 90s show, reruns, whatever. It's not even sad, but I find myself crying.
Wait, now I have to know what the show is.
Okay, it's My So-Called Life.
No shame. No shame at
with
all.
With Angela and Jordan. But it just goes to show my heart is softening.
Yeah.
It's like those commercials we see, like the Hallmark or whatever, where, oh my gosh, that's so sad, But it's weird because I'll catch myself, like a tear will fall.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's just crazy because for so long I was so angry. I couldn't cry even if I tried to. So the fact that I'm now at a movie theater and my husband's like, are you okay? It's just a sad scene.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, oh my gosh, like... It's a weird feeling, just like when all of a sudden I was smiling and I'm like, whoa. Same thing with the tears to this day. I'm like, I do have emotions. And it's okay to cry.
I love that.
And I did take Grief Share. I've taken that support group. I've taken Healing as a Choice support group. So I'm now a big advocate of, I actually help with the divorce care class now. I help facilitate the kids class. There's actually a kids class with kids going through divorce. So I do help with that every other semester. But I do remember in Grief Share, they said sometimes you just have to force yourself to cry to get the tears out. And I remember her saying, if you know of a sad movie, make yourself watch it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, heck no. No. But there's truth to that.
Yes.
It's like you can be so hurt and so your heart's so hardened, it doesn't allow you to cry, but you still have to release it. Like it's there. You have to release it. So I have yet to do that one. I'm like, we're not going to, but I do know there's songs. There's certain songs I can hear. There was one, Held by Natalie Grant. Every time I heard that with my baby loss, it always made me cry. but it was also a release and it always made me feel better in a way. So I mean, if you can do it, I encourage you if you're going through some hard, like seriously, like you sometimes have to make yourself cry to feel better.
Yeah. The word release is perfect because it is. And you had mentioned this earlier too, but our bodies they tangibly hold grief and trauma. And so we do need to express that. And you can feel chronic issues can become a problem when you don't process your grief and your trauma. I also love that you shared that your grief was delayed, because I don't think that's something that we talk about at all. And it's another thing I find people get really wrapped up in is like, I should have arrived by now, right? I should be done with this. I should have gotten over it, or however you want to say it. But it's this idea that there's a certain amount of time for you to get things together in your life, and then you have to move past it. And that's just not how we work as beings.
Or the stages of grief, they can intertwine. And I didn't know that either. Like once I'm in shock and anger and denial, then it should be, whatever the stage. But you can also go back.
Yeah.
To stage 1 and go to stage 4 and 3 and 2 and 4 and 3 and 2 for years.
Yeah.
Like I didn't, and it's weird that they talk about those stages, but like I went through it and I'm like, they actually know what they're talking about. Like our bodies literally go through. Yeah, it'd be nice if you could just say, okay.
Yeah, I'm done with anger. Now I'm moving on to the next, and I could check it off my list.
Yes, check that one right off and moving right along.
Yeah, exactly.
And now we're to acceptance.
Yeah.
And then you wake up and you're like, oh, I'm angry. And then you're sad because you're angry.
Yeah.
But I just accepted it. No.
Yeah.
And this is completely off topic, but they talk about forgiveness, about that forgiveness is a process too.
Absolutely.
Like it takes, you can go years, it can take years to go through and forgive somebody in the process. It's just weird that grief and forgiveness, it's all a process.
Absolutely. They are active processes, right? So, or like active things that we're doing. We talk about them as if they're one moment in time, and that's just not the case. You have to continuously and consciously decide to do it over and over and over again, which is another reason why it's so exhausting. Like working through your emotions and working through your trauma is a very important task, but it is a very physically exhausting task. And we like to think that it's only by doing manual labor or, something like that we get this feeling of total body exhaustion. And that's not true. Just the way that our minds and our bodies are connected is so intrinsic, and you cannot have one without the other. So, I just say that to, and kind of echo all of the things that you're saying, to just tell people, have compassion for yourself as you're walking through this, have compassion for somebody else as they're walking through this.
And grace, give yourself grace.
It is a journey, and it's not, the destination isn't even part of the equation, right? It's the everyday walking through it and just deciding what that day is going to look like. So yeah, it's hard.
And it's definitely a choice. Do I choose to get out of bed today, or do I need that day? But you do have to be like, okay, I've been in bed now for 3 days. Like, this is enough.
Yeah.
Even, as a mom, I do take those breaks, those mental breaks. I'm like, okay, mom needs a break.
Yep.
I need a break. Like, order that pizza. It's a hard balance.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And to that point, you don't have to have gone through major trauma to need or to be exhausted emotionally from life. Life is hard. Life can be really difficult, So on that note, also give yourself compassion and grace, because you don't have to be on every day.
You should have given me that advice when I was first a stepmom. Yes, that would have been nice.
Dang
like
it.
A little fortune cookie of advice right
10
there.
years too late.
Man, I tried to be the perfect stepmom. It did not go too well.
That must be really difficult. A really difficult situation to walk into. Not,
it was very hard.
Notwithstanding all of the other stuff you had going on at the time, but then you're walking into being a stepmom. It's just a totally different role. I have no experience with it, but I can imagine it's a completely different shift.
Okay, so I didn't go see a psychiatrist again. I did go to my primary doctor, and I'm like, can you put me on anxiety medicine? Because I'm a stepmom, and I'm losing my mind. So I did, after about 2 years, I did get off all those medications.
Okay.
Chronic pain was still there. Because even as a stepmom, life was stressful. It wasn't until about 5 years ago, my chronic pain finally went away.
Wow.
So yeah, for a while, I was not on any medicine. And then, you have 3 preteens in the house, all with the hormones. I'm like, I
need something.
And then you want the perfect meatloaf, and you trip and you fall, and the meatloaf flies all over the floor.
No.
Yeah, that one happened once.
Oh.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm not the best mom.
Oh, gosh.
I do believe I did cry to my doctor. I said, I just need something. He's like, yes, you need something.
You need something.
But medicine is good. It does balance us. Some medicines we might need to be on, our whole life. And then sometimes it's just to help us. I think people say, I don't want to be medicated. I don't want to be medicated. It's okay. Sometimes it's just a matter of regulating your system.
Yeah. For a
if
season.
that means get your sleep in, start getting 8 hours of sleep, more power to you. Go pop those pills.
No, but really, no, I agree. It's people are afraid. They don't want to become dependent, and I completely understand. But sometimes what we're going through is just too much. You need help. And there's no shame in that.
I'm actually on anxiety medication right now. They've diagnosed me with generalized anxiety disorder. I don't depend on it, but part of me is like, I don't ever want to be the way I was before.
Yeah.
So, I look back on where I was, 15 years ago, and I'm like, I don't ever want to go through that again.
Yeah.
Or, even to have suicidal ideation.
Yeah.
And if someone is struggling with that or with anxiety, and medication can help just tweak it a little bit and just make it better. Yeah. I'm like, I don't ever want to be like that again.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I'm like, if that means I'm going to take some anxiety medicine, okay.
That's what it means.
That's what it means.
100%. Fantastic. I love your story. I love that you tell your story. It's a hard story to tell. And you've said a couple of times that it was a long journey to be able to tell it, but you've put a lot of work in. And I think it's important to acknowledge that work matters, and it's made you who you are. It's part of why you are who you are. And sharing your story is one of the best things you can do to serve other people. I personally believe. So thank you so much for just being willing to share.
Oh, I want to add one more thing.
Yes, please do.
So me being all angry with God, sorry, God, I did flip you off a few times. But now I do Bible studies with people. And somebody just got baptized 2 weeks ago because I helped them go through a study and teach them God's word. And so sometimes it's like, is this even my life? To go
Surreal.
back, it is surreal to where I was the person that was so angry. And it just goes to show we can change. It does take work, and it is a journey, even not talking about our faith or anything, but we can change.
Yes.
We can make a difference in the world with our stories. It's just a matter of how we choose to, deal with it or share it. But I don't know. I just look back and I'm like, man, I help with divorce care ministry at church, and I'm doing Bible studies. Like, who am I? I married a Christian man. But it goes to show too, God's still there, and he's still watching over us. And even when we go through hard times and we're mad at him, I'm sure he would tell me, I understand what you were going through.
Yeah.
I understand.
That was, I think, the best piece of advice I got from my therapist after, when I was in a really dark time in my life, because I was struggling with a lot of anger towards God as well, but not being able to admit it, because I did grow up in the church. So it was that's not something you do. And my therapist, who was a Christian counselor, was like, you can be mad at God. He can handle it. And I was like, what? It was the most liberating advice I ever got, because I had spent so much energy trying to convince myself that I wasn't angry at God because that was wrong. Mm-hmm. When I needed to just feel my feelings.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I still remember Jesus getting mad and flipping that table.
Yep.
So he has literally felt all our emotions.
Yeah.
It's okay. Or like someone said once, we don't get over our grief. We move through it. Like you don't ever. And that was like a huge light bulb.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, like it won't ever go away.
Yes.
You just have to learn to move forward in life with it. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, okay, so it is going to be with me. But I know, it's just weird how some people can say such small things and it's like,
yeah, and it sticks with you forever. Yeah. Absolutely. It can be completely life-changing. But I really do agree with what you said about change and that we are capable of change. It does take work, though. It takes effort. And
consistency.
You have to be willing to do the work. Mm-hmm. You can't just sit in your grief and your pain and think that it's going to magically get better. And I don't say that to say like anybody should be doing this, that, or the other. All I'm saying that for is from personal experience, you have the ability to be happy, but you have to do the work.
I do remember, I think it was when Rylan was 4 and I was a single mom. I felt like a robot. Get up, go to work, come home, do this, get up, go. And I feel like a lot of people have those same feelings and nobody wants to live that way. Like we don't want to live like robots. We want to have a purpose and we want to find that joy. And like you said, it's just choosing one day at a time to take a shower or to get out of bed or to eat your breakfast. And man, I'm such a big person about those support groups. I'm just telling you, like, you have to swallow your pride sometimes and go knock on that door and be like, I hear there's a support group. I really need help. And you really have to humble yourself, but they really do help much better than that psychiatrist.
I don't think he was helping anybody, unfortunately.
I think I'm traumatized by him.
I think so.
We need to have a whole show about
trauma
with the psychiatrist. But
truly, oh my goodness, that can be such a terrible experience. You're going in expecting one thing and get something completely different. So, which
is weird because I went in expecting one thing with support groups.
Yeah, true.
And I got something completely different.
Yep.
And you do heal. And now I had to put effort and there was weekly homework and we had to read a book and you had to put in the actions.
Yep.
So you do the work and you will discover things about yourselves. You'll find out you're stronger than you think. You're not alone. And life is hard.
Yeah. Because again, emotional work is work. You are doing work and you can only fake that you're doing it for so long because if you don't end up seeing the fruit of the work that you're putting in, then what's the point, right? But if you do actually do the work, you will see the fruit of it.
You know that phrase, fake it till you make it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can only fake it for so long.
Yeah.
As a stepmom, it's like, fake it till you make it. Just put on that happy face. I'm like, I can't keep faking it.
Yeah, truly.
But there came a point where I learned and grow, and
I mean, fake it till you make it can be a great jumping off point, right? It can be a great, like, you know what? I don't have any confidence right now. I'm just going to get out there. But at a certain point, you have to pick up something real along the way.
Right. Okay. I got to stop acting now.
Yeah.
Like that point when you've grown and you're like, I'm not faking it anymore. Mm-hmm. Like, I am happy. Mm-hmm. Or, oh, I do enjoy this.
And it'll catch you off guard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times what I've found too is it's only when I'm looking back that I see how far I've come, right? Like it can be really easy to not get down on myself, but not think that I've come as far as I have. And then I look back at who I was or where I was and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a completely different person.
And I think it's because you made that choice, even though it was probably hard. I mean, everybody has a story.
Yep.
It's just a matter of what we do with it, and hopefully it has a happy ending.
I hope so too. This is awesome. You're a great guest. You're good at this podcast thing.
Thanks. You want to stay longer? We can just, talk about anything.
I know, right?
What you doing for dinner tonight? Oh, wait, I'm going on a date with my husband. He won't like that. Never mind.
I won't third wheel your date this time. I did bring my mom out with me. So I was like, I've never been to St. Louis before. So
it's fun.
Yeah.
And you got it on a good day where it's not 110 degree heat index. So
yes.
Way to go.
This worked out great.
Well, good.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to The Human Experience. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe, share it with your friends and family, share it on social media, and rate and review it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can also support the podcast financially by going to my website, thehxpod.com, linked in the show notes, and clicking on Donate. It takes a lot of time and resources to create this podcast, so every little bit helps. Everyone has a story, and I'd love to hear yours. So be sure to check out the show notes for more information about how to stay in touch. Do good and love well.